Hi, my name is Jim and I was retired. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to fight inflation. Stay tuned. So I'm recovering from round 2 of my Mohs surgery with a scar on my forehead and a little bruising around my eyes. So I'm recovering, but I'm going to use a side camera angle again this week with a little screen recording to bring you my thoughts on how to fight inflation. There were 3 important updates on the fight against inflation this week, starting with Monday's announcement from Treasury Department of the official I-bond rate. As expected, it's 9.62% for bonds purchased in the next 6 months, starting May 1st through the end of October. If you buy a bond, you're going to earn 9.62% for the first 6 months. And then the second 6 months will be the rate that's set in November. Now, if you followed my prior videos and already bought your bond in April, then you'll get this 9.62% in October. Now, keep in mind that when the bond rate changes depends upon when you purchase the bond. So if you followed my advice and purchased your bond in April, then that new rate is going to apply on October 1st. If you bought this bond back in December, I bought one of those in 2021 in December at this rate, its new rate will apply on June 1st. That's the way I-bonds worked. It doesn't kick in immediately. It depends upon the month of when you purchased your I-bond. But if you did buy in April, you're going to earn the 7.12% for the 6 months and then get the 9.62% for the next 6 months. And that's going to average out to an 8.54% return for the 12 months. But what if you missed out buying in April? Should you buy in May? Maybe. It depends. Again, we're talking about cash you do not need for the next 12 months. But if you have cash that you were thinking of putting into a CD ladder for 1 to 5 years, you definitely want to compare I-bonds to the rates that you'll get from the CDs at your bank. For instance, I did this spreadsheet here. Suppose you bought a I-bond in May and you're going to get that 9.62, which is the inflation factor here, and you're going to earn that interest $80 a month for the first 6 months. Now suppose the November rate is 0. That means we've hit deflation, we're in a recession, and it's not going to pay anything for the next 6 months. Highly unlikely, but even if that happens, you're still earning 4.81%, $480 of interest for that 12 months. And compare that to what a 1.2% CD, a 12-month CD at Marcus, for instance, would earn. It's 4 times as much as you would get on that online bank. Imagine what you're going to get at your local bank. Keep in mind that 9.62% that we're currently getting for these next 6 months is the highest composite rate. The 7.12% was the 3rd highest. Now, I'm not sure November's going to be this high, but even if it's in the 2 to 3 range here, or even as high as 4, you're going to earn a solid return for the 12 months compared to a bank CD. So if you have not purchased an I-bond yet, don't give up hope. Go to the treasurydirect.gov and look it up. By the way, if you need more information about the I-bonds, be sure to look at my playlist on what I know about I-bonds. It includes the information on how to do gift bonds to your spouse to get over the $10,000 per tax ID limit. The second important news on the fight against inflation is what happened Wednesday on the second day of the Federal Open Market Committee meeting. That's when the policymakers announced that the new target federal funds rate would go up by 50 basis points, a half a percent point. That was widely expected. And as I pointed last week, that 50 basis points is a lot rarer than a quarter point move, which is their typical move. In fact, it was the first half point move in 20 years. But we are facing inflation that is at a 40-year high. Now, Chair Jerome Powell backed up that action with some more hawkish language in his press briefing immediately following, announcing that a 50 basis point hike would be on the table for the next 2 meetings. That sure sounded hawkish, but then he immediately ruled out a larger increase with a question in his press conference. 75 basis points was not under consideration. Well, the market, which had been pricing the possibility of a 75 basis point in one of the upcoming meetings, immediately rallied for 900 plus points Wednesday afternoon. But then the next day, they started to think maybe this less than hawkish Fed wouldn't be able to control inflation. And so the market went down 1,000 points on Thursday and a little bit more on Friday. Now, Chair Powell stepped on the hawkish actions of the FOMC with a 50 basis point hike this meeting and the potential of 2 more hikes in June and July, with dovish language that aimed for a soft or softish landing.
I would say I think we have a good chance to have a soft or softish landing or outcome, if you will, and I'll give you a couple of reasons for that. One is households and businesses are in very strong financial shape. You're looking at excess savings on balance sheets, excess in the sense that they're substantially larger than the prior trend. Businesses are in good financial shape. The labor market is, as I mentioned, very, very strong. And so it doesn't seem to be anywhere close to a downturn.
Now, I don't know about you, but a softish landing sounds like he ought to practice his tuck and roll. Asking for a friend, does a softish landing include a recession or not? So all of this softish, hawkish language ends up sounding dovish. Now, the Cme Fed Watch Tool looks at the futures odds for actions by the Fed. And Wednesday morning, before the FOMC, it was clearly intended to suggest that there would be a 50 basis point hike at that May meeting, followed by 1, 2, 3 more, and then 4 quarter point hikes. He took that 75 basis point off the table completely, but he also altered this with his strong language about only having it on the table for 2 meetings. So here is the same tool from Thursday, and you can see that, again, it moves the dates 1 up, but they're looking at a 50 basis point hike for June and another one for July, and now they're on for quarter point hikes from then on. So he altered the path of what the market expects in terms of how aggressive they'll be. If you look at today's market tool, you can see that the probabilities, look at this, they're still calling for that 50%, 50%, a quarter, then maybe a 50% by November, and then quarters. So the market doesn't understand what the Fed is planning on doing with their rate hikes. That does not instill confidence. Now also, let's take a look at the odds for the December meeting. So if we go to compare and then look at that December meeting, I want to show you this, that they're now looking at about a 43% chance that you're going to be in that 3 to 3.25 federal funds rate by the end of this year with that action. This is clearly showing that the market's now locking in around a 3 to 3.25 federal funds rate by the end of this year. Now, where's inflation going to be? If inflation is still going to be at about 5 to 6%, where inflation expectations expected to be, then the federal funds rate is still going to be chasing inflation and not crushing it. Now, a lot of people think that ruling out the 75 basis points is what really caused the market turmoil. But I think there are also people who have taken a look at what they did on the balance sheet and were less than impressed. In March's meeting, they outlined a plan that called for quantitative tightening of $95 billion a month. And again, I said that sounded like a lot, but when you're talking about $9 trillion, it would take about 3 years to get down to a level that most people think is the appropriate level of the balance sheet for monetary policy. And instead of going for the $95 billion, they decided $47.5 billion for the next 3 months, and then they'll get up to that $95 billion. The whole idea of half-sizing what they're going to do for quantitative tightening, and starting it June 1st instead of immediately, just sounds like they're quart-sizing that quantitative tightening instead of going for it hawkishly like they should have. We won't understand why they did that until the minutes of the FOMC meeting come out in about 3 weeks. And Chair Powell was not exactly clear as to why.
So why June 1? It was just pick a date, and that happened to be the date that we picked. It was nothing magic about it. It's not going to have any macroeconomic significance over time. We just picked that. Sometimes we publish these calendars on the first day of the month, and that's what we're doing. I wouldn't read anything into it. In terms of the effect, I would just stress how uncertain the effect is of shrinking the balance sheet. We run these models, and everyone does in this field, and make estimates of what will be the how do you measure a certain quantum of balance sheet shrinkage compared to quantitative easing. And these are very uncertain. I really can't be any clearer. There won't be any clearer. People estimate that that broadly on the path we're on, and this will be taken probably too seriously, but sort of 1/4%, one rate increase over the course of a year at this pace. But I would just say with very wide uncertainty bands, very wide.
Here's how one Twitter observer put that. Let me show you. Now, and on Friday, we had the third bit of news about fighting inflation, and that was the most recent jobs report for April. And again, it was a strong number, and the unemployment rate stayed low. But hidden in that strong jobs report was an indication that while wage growth was 5.4%, it's falling far short of the 8.5% inflation rate. So again, I'm going to conclude with my standard warning. I am not an economist. I'm not a financial planner. I'm just a DIY retiree. So take these as entertaining ideas from one educated consumer to another. Always do your own due diligence and seek out a professional if you need to. Hey, did you like and subscribe to this channel? The more you do that, the higher this will be in the search results. Thank you.